All right, so there are some mysteries that just kind of stick with you, and for a lot of people, I think that's the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
This area, right? It's kind of loosely defined, I guess, between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This stretch of the Atlantic that has just captured people's imaginations for so long.
Right.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into this. We're going to use the articles and research that you sent over and just really try to navigate all the different theories swirling around this infamous region.
Sounds good.
It's interesting right off the bat just how loosely defined those boundaries are.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's not like a perfect triangle that's marked on a map or anything. It's more of a general area.
Right, and that's part of what makes it, I think, so mysterious too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that it's not like this concrete thing.
Yeah, and as you pointed out in your materials, what's really interesting too is the two sides of it. You have the folks who really think that there's something paranormal going on, and then you have the people who are looking for more of a scientific explanation.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating to dig into, is you have such a wide spectrum of potential explanations.
It's true.
So let's talk about the notoriety of this place, right? Because I think for many people, it's because of the sheer number of ships and aircraft that have seemingly vanished without a trace.
Right.
And we're talking about some pretty big cases that I think stick in people's minds. I
Yeah.
think about Flight 19, right? These 5 Navy bombers that were just lost in 1945 during a training exercise.
I remember reading about that, yeah.
And the thing that's even more crazy about that case is that the rescue plane that was sent after them disappeared as well.
Wow.
So it's like a double mystery, right?
It really is.
And then, and some of the older articles that you sent over, pointed to cases like the USS Cyclops, which disappeared in 1918.
Yeah.
And this was a huge vessel. It wasn't just a small boat.
Right.
And then more recently, the SSL Pharaoh in 2015.
Right, more modern examples.
So the lack of definitive explanations for some of these cases has led to so much speculation.
It's understandable, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think the imagination really starts to run wild.
Right.
So let's kind of try to dig into, the why, right? Based on all the research that you've done.
Okay.
Because on one end of the spectrum, as some of these more, sensational articles point out, you have the paranormal theories.
Yeah.
Right? You have, people talking about aliens and time warps and even, connections to the lost city of Atlantis.
Which, makes for a really good story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so compelling, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think as the more scientific articles that you sent over kind of point out, these paranormal explanations are largely dismissed by most of the scientific community just because there isn't that hard evidence to support it.
Right.
But what's interesting is when we start looking at the natural causes, because there's some really, really fascinating theory.
Well, and that's what I love about this kind of stuff, is that you can go down that rabbit hole of like the crazy theories.
Sure.
But then you can also look at the things that actually, could have happened.
The more grounded explanations, exactly.
Yeah, and so your research brought up some interesting things like, the weather patterns in that area.
Yes.
And how quickly they can change.
Yeah, they're unpredictable.
Yeah, and then, we can't forget about rogue waves.
Yeah, those are frightening.
Which are these massive, unexpected walls of water.
Right, just come out of nowhere.
Seemingly out of nowhere, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the powerful ocean currents, right? Especially the Gulf Stream,
right?
Which your notes mentioned can be incredibly strong.
They can, and very disorienting, even for experienced, captains and navigators.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about the power of nature, right?
It is.
When you're out there on the open ocean, how insignificant you really are. And then there's another theory that I thought was really interesting that came from, I think it was the Geological Survey document that you sent.
Yes.
Which was talking about methane gas eruptions from the seabed.
Yeah, this is a fascinating
So
one.
explain this a little bit more, because I didn't fully grasp it.
Sure. So the idea is that you have these deposits of methane gas underneath the seabed,
Okay.
and sometimes those can be released, quite suddenly.
Okay.
And when that happens, it reduces the density of the water quite significantly, and that can cause ships to, very quickly lose buoyancy
Oh, wow.
and potentially sink.
So they're just going along, and then suddenly they're just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that when that happens, it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of debris
Right.
on the surface.
Oh, I see.
So it makes it even harder to find, any trace of what happened.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
It is.
So with all of these potential explanations, right? We've got paranormal stuff. We've got these crazy natural phenomena. What is the official stance?
Yeah.
Because everyone thinks of the Bermuda Triangle as this super dangerous place.
Right. It has that reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you the government or the maritime authorities say about it?
Well, the interesting thing is that based on the materials that you sent me from the U.S. Coast Guard, they don't actually officially recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a danger zone.
Wow.
Yeah, and statistically,
Correct.
it is a little bit surprising, but statistically, when you actually look at the volume of traffic that goes through that area, the number of disappearances isn't actually significantly higher than other similarly trafficked regions.
Okay, so it's more about the hype than the actual statistic.
Well, it seems that way, and you also send over some media analysis pieces that kind of talk about
Right.
how the media has played a role in building up that kind of mythical status.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a story that sells. Right?
It's a good story.
It's a good story. It's mysterious. It's intriguing. But then you also have to look at the advancements in technology, right? Especially navigation and communication over the decades.
Exactly.
And how that's probably played a huge role in reducing incidents at sea globally.
Of course.
And that would include the Bermuda Triangle.
Right, because if you think about it, back in the day, when a lot of these famous cases happened,
Right.
navigation was not nearly as sophisticated as it is today.
Right.
And communication was much more limited.
You couldn't just, send out an SOS and have somebody there, within minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. So those factors definitely contributed to the higher number of incidents in the past.
Right.
I think.
So I guess if we're kind of, pulling it all together here from all the research that you've done and the articles that you've sent over, it seems like the scientific consensus is that while the Bermuda Triangle is a fascinating story, and definitely have a hold on our, imagination and our popular culture, there's not really any evidence to support these claims of, supernatural forces.
Right. It seems like the more likely explanations are
Yeah.
a combination of natural phenomena and unfortunately sometimes human error.
Right.
Or equipment malfunction.
Yeah, I mean, those things happen.
They do.
Especially, out on the open ocean.
Right.
But I think, the big question here and the thing that I'd love for our listeners to kind of ponder is if there's no real evidence for this paranormal activity, why are we still so fascinated by this place?
It's a great question.
Right? I mean, it's almost like, what is it about the unknown that's so alluring?
Yeah.
Even when we have, these rational explanations.
Yeah, and why this particular region, out of all the mysterious places in the world, why does this one continue to capture our imaginations and fuel all these legends? And you sent over some really interesting sociological articles that explore this very question.
Right.
And I don't know that there's a simple answer.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to think about.
It is, and I think that's what makes it so interesting to keep coming back to this topic, right?
Absolutely.
Is that even though, we can explain away some of the mysteries,
Yeah.
there's still that element of the unknown that keeps us coming back.
It's true.
So
It's a good mystery.
yeah, it's a good mystery, and it's one that I think will probably continue to fascinate people for, decades to come.
I think so too.
So I appreciate you taking the time to go through all of this research with me and kind of sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. It's a fun conversation.
It was, yeah, and hopefully our listeners got something out of it too.
I hope so.
All right, well that's it for this deep dive into the Bermuda Triangle.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.